My name is Marc Perkel. I'm the founder of Junk Email Filter, which is a small spam filtering company. It's so small that I'm it, you know. And I've been filtering spam for 16 years now. I'm one of the pioneers in doing what I do. It's a filter and forward system. So it's spam filtering as a service. People redirect their MX records to point to my servers. I filter it and then forward it on to their existing servers or my email hosting system. So this has been quite a conference. I've really kind of enjoyed looking at a lot of the other presentations here. Although, quite frankly, as a small player that doesn't have tens of thousands of computers like a lot of you people do, it's almost hard to wrap my head around what it must be like, to really do the big stuff, And I look at this stuff in awe, and trying to understand, some of what the big players do, and I'm not one of them. So my presentation is going to be a little bit different than some of the other presentations that you had that kind of make your head swim, that they're so complex, in that probably in this room, most of you people here know more about Redis than I do. And that's a weird thing to admit, because you're wondering, well, if you know more about Redis than me, then why am I up here? I am up here and you're in the audience. And part of it is because, I didn't have to pay for a ticket, if you're a speaker. And another part of it is that, having the little red sticker makes me feel important, But the biggest thing is that Redis is easy to learn. And I went from, learning Redis to having a working artificial intelligence spam filter in 2 days. That included the learning curve. And that's one of the reasons I'm speaking here, is about how easy Redis is to learn and how you can do some really innovative stuff, because the advertisement for this, talked about this being a spam filter presentation, but it didn't mention that this is an artificial intelligence spam filter presentation. This is not Bayesian filtering, and it's not a neural network. It's something that I actually sort of stumbled upon by accident. I've been a programmer since 1979. And so I'm kind of old school, worked my way up through the system, evolving from, one platform to the other, from CP/M to DOS to Windows to Linux, being a software company, a computer retail store, and lots of other things in between. And I started really getting serious about spam filtering back in 2001 to 2003. I was the system administrator for the Electronic Frontier Foundation, which is one of the only real jobs I've had in my life where I was actually working for somebody else. I've been self-employed most all my life. And during that period, it was an interesting place to start spam filtering, because I was spam filtering for them at the same time I was doing a development of my own company. And, that was a situation where you had people some people wanted all their spam. They felt like spam was a form of free speech. And other people were like, please, Mark, do something. I can't read my email. I get 5,000 spams a day. And so I had to work in an environment where I had, people with a lot of different opinions that would normally seem impossible to sort out, and I managed to sort it out and develop a system. Now, my system predates SpamAssassin somewhat, and SpamAssassin did come out around the same time, but I had most of the stuff that I had written was in a language called XM, which is a mail transfer agent that has a very sophisticated programming language built into it, and I do use actually I still use some SpamAssassin is kind of a last ditch, if I get down to where nothing else has figured it out, I'll throw it at SpamAssassin and hope for the best. If SpamAssassin doesn't determine it's spam, then I pass it on, and say, okay, I'm going to let this through. In the spam filtering business, one of the things that's important is not blocking good email. They want you to block spam, but blocking spam isn't the main thing. The main thing is to deliver good email is good. So if you got to let some spam through in order to do that, then you have to loosen things up and make sure that the good email gets through. And so I already had what I think is a pretty good system to start with. I was probably better, to start with it than most of the big companies are. Certainly, left Yahoo and Microsoft to shame. Probably competitive with Google back then. And then one of the things about SpamAssassin is that. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, I did. One of the things about SpamAssassin was that I never could get the Bayesian stuff to work, and although the Bayesian stuff never worked very well, I was using MySQL, I was using it, with a RAM disk, thinking that, maybe that'll keep up. It never kept up, and then I saw where they had Redis. So I tried Redis, and it was like, wow. I installed it, and it actually worked the first time. I thought, there's got to be something wrong here. Nothing in Linux works the first time. And so I thought somebody was messing with my head, And so I get it, and I point SpamAssassin to Redis. It's like, wow, Bayesian's working all of a sudden, except that the people in SpamAssassin never coded the part that deletes old data. And since their Bayesian wasn't all that good anyhow, I just ended up just wiping the database every Saturday automatically anyhow, just to get something. But I was very impressed with Redis as a result of this. And at the same time, one of the problems in the spam filtering business is when people email you and say, hey, you're blocking my good email, and they send me an example, and their email telling me that I'm blocking their good email bounces back to them. So I never get the message knowing that. That's not a good thing. So I started adding some, white words in the subject line, basically saying, if they say, blocked or remove or things that, would alert me that there's a problem, that just using those words, because I thought, a lot of these things are words and phrases that spammers never use, and as a result, I started getting these email messages. And then I thought, well, I had a couple customers that had some problems, and I went into the log files and I looked at the subject lines of these companies, and I picked out, maybe 15 words and phrases in subject lines that I thought, okay, spammers never say this, and I put it made a subject whitelist, on a per user basis or per domain basis. And think, so okay, this actually hits about 75% of the email that these companies get, because it talks about specialized things that they do that spammers never talk about. One domain dealt with weddings, and there was a lot of wedding language, and spammers would never talk about. And I thought, wouldn't it be something if I could come up with a way to whitelist all the stuff that spammers never talk about. So I thought, well, how do you get a list of everything the spammers never say? And the way I thought of doing it was, well, I'll store everything the spammers do say and see if it's not in the list. So I installed Redis, and like I said, I was already impressed with it. It was very easy to learn. I got online and I saw that 3-hour tutorial that comes up first when you type in Redis tutorial. And I watched it and it was like, wow, that all looks easy, set, get, operations, set operations, intersect, diff. And, I tried it with some data, seemed to work. So then what I did was I started tokenizing email. And I would take, I'll use the subject line as an example. I would take the subject line and break it up into every combination of 1, 2, 3, and 4 word sequential phrases. And I would also do that with the first 80 words of the body. And if it was good email, I would store it as ham phrases. If it was spam, I would store it as spam phrases. And I had reliable streams that I could learn from. My spam stream came from I did things like advertised. I had authenticated email when I really didn't. So only spammers would be trying to authenticate. Every password worked. So they thought that, hey, I'm spamming, and I, get, hundreds a second, of 100% pure hacker spam, in which case I would accept it. I would run that right into my learner. And then I turned around on the back end and sold the data to some of my competitors, who pay me for spam so that they can make their spam filters better. And then on the ham side, of course, there's lots of websites that send out nothing but 100% good email. They'd never send a spam, and I had a big white list of those sources. And I got this idea. It was like a Christmas Eve and Christmas, So, I'm not doing anything, and there's not a lot of activity, and and it took me 2 days to code this up. And I had a working system in 2 days, and in the Christmas evening, the neighbors invited me over for dinner. I started the learner before I went to dinner. I was over there for 3 hours. Like I had 3 hours worth of data, and then I started, scoring this thing. And the whole concept was based on an extremely simple premise, is that because part of this thing that was unique was that most spam filters identify spam, and whatever's left over is good email. What I was trying to do was have a way to positively identify good email, and nobody really had a general test to identify good email as good. And my definition of good email in this paradigm is that if people are saying things in good email that match things that people have said in other good email that spammers have never said, it's good email. So for instance, if I send you an email and the subject line is, "Let's get some lunch," spammers never say, "Let's get some lunch." I've processed billions of emails, and spammers have never said that. And there's, millions, billions of phrases that spammers never say. Well, even at that, even if somebody starts spamming saying, "Let's get some lunch," it'll only gain them some points on the first try, because if it's in both lists, it cancels itself out, So they don't gain points by doing this. They merely nullify something that might have got something else listed as good email. But I'm looking at so many data points within the email. If somebody wipes out some, it doesn't make any difference, because I'm looking at so much information that if they were to duplicate everything that I'm looking for, then they're no longer sending spam. It's good email at that point. So the way this works is that I'm matching ham and intersecting ham and do a diff against spam. So that makes it ham only. And then I match spam and do a diff against ham, and then that's spam only. I do a card on, to do a count. I subtract the two values, and if the number's positive, it's spam. If it's negative, it's ham. It's the basics of formula for this system is actually that easy. If it's ham, I then route that back into the learner, and then, the phrases that got it classified as ham are reinforced, by resetting the expire count and incrementing a number, for the number of times it hit. And all the new phrases that are in that ham are learned. So if I'm talking about, I have a machine company, I'm talking about machine A, thing gets classified as spam. Somebody else sends a message mentioning machine A, that gets them classified as ham, and they mention machine B. Now machine B is classified as ham, and anybody who mentions machine B of the 4,500 domains or so that I'm processing, that's all good email. So the system is learning the vocabulary of how normal people talk. that are different than the way spammers talk, and it's learning the vocabulary of how spammers talk. And in this paradigm, it defeats, things that spammers try with other systems, like, how many ways can you misspell the word Viagra? And every other system is based on matching, so if they have something that doesn't match, then it gets through, where it doesn't register. In my case, my system is built on not matching. So, once you learn, there's like 100 different spellings for Viagra, then the tricks that I use to get around other filters are the things that get them caught on my filter. So, let me see, go down the, I have a web page that explains all this stuff in detail. So, the subject line here, the quick brown fox jumps over the lazy dog. Let's say that's the subject line. So I take that and I run it through a little Pascal program that I wrote. I use Pascal because I learned it a long time ago, and I feel comfortable with it for these things. And I break it down into these phrases. And I do the same thing with the body of the message. I do the same thing with the headers. I do the same thing with the attachment names. I do the attachment extensions. I do behavioral stuff, if their reverse DNS is bad, if their email is slow, if they close the connection with a quit or not, and just a whole bunch of, PHP scripts that are, referenced in the headers, store them. And anyhow, once I tokenize these things, so I start learning these different attributes, whether it be subject, body, headers, or whatnot. I learn those in separate databases, and they just get added to sets. They're in the ham sets or the spam sets. And then when a new message comes in, it gets tokenized, and then I go and compare all the different sets. Intersect ham, diff spam, intersect spam, diff ham, subtract, and I get a result. Now, I'm oversimplifying it, but the core of how this thing works is based on that principle. And Redis is what gives me the power to do this. I used to think 32 gigs of RAM was a lot of memory for a computer, but once I started using Redis, I found out that 32 gigs is nothing. And but it's not an insane amount. So I basically have the database split up over 4 different computers that all hold different aspects of it. One of them is just body data. Another one is I store every domain that the message touches. Whether it be domains that are in the received lines, domains within the message, email addresses, links, name servers for all these domains, MX records for all these domains, so I get a big list of domains. And in that case, what I do what I do in the second thing is, see, some of these things I have as sequential, and then some of it I do all combinations. And the one down there toward the bottom of the screen that I'm going to scroll up here, this is where I'm doing all combinations, so A, B, C, D, E becomes all these combinations. And I alphabetize them to reduce the amount of storage. So I can look up based on that. Now, the thing that this does for me is that I don't have to, I can take some aspect of an email message and just say, notice this, and make a little one-word token that says, bad RDNS, no RDNS, just words that represent some aspect of email. I don't have to tell the system whether this is a spam feature or a ham feature, and I don't have to provide any type of scoring. I don't have to associate it with combinations of things with anything. All I do is mention to the system, this is an aspect of it. it does all the classification and scoring automatically. And the more stuff I can come up with, the more I throw at it. It's like as if I had SpamAssassin with 30 million rules that ran instantly. And automatically adapt on a moment-by-moment basis. And Redis, which is what really makes all this stuff work so well, is so fast that if I have a connection from another server that's sending me 2 emails in the same connection, that the first email, when it's received, is learned in real time fast enough that the score on the second email on the same connection the score is already affected by the first email that went through. And you're not going to do that with neural networks. And I'm learning a little bit about neural networks, which are very impressive. Some of the stuff that Google's doing is awesome, but the learning on neural networks is very resource intensive. Using Redis, the learning is just set add, sadd. It actually learns faster than it looks up. So, I can dump that in there, almost instantly. Let me scroll down a little further on this thing here. So here's an example of how not matching works compared to matching. And in this thing, I take 2 phrases. One is ham and one is spam. And these are subject lines. And one of them is, meet hot Russian brides online. And the second was, I read an article about Russian brides in a magazine. Now, in a traditional spam filtering system, they would have a Russian brides rule, and mentioning Russian brides scores some points. So 99% of the email that comes in, that mentions Russian brides is spam. But it's not always spam. So, in that system, that rule would be wrong 1% of the time. Now for some people that's fine, but when you're in a spam filtering business and you get yelled at, when people lose their good email, 1% isn't good enough. 99.9% accuracy is not good enough. And so here's the way my system works, is that the phrase Russian brides used in both ham and spam becomes nullified because it was used in both worlds. However, the phrases, on the spam side, meet hot Russians, meet hot Russian brides, hot Russian brides online, brides online, and online with an exclamation point, would all match spam phrases, So there's, 7 matches on the spam side, where on the ham side, I read an article. Spammers don't say I read an article. Read an article about Russian, about an article about in a magazine, brides in a. These are phrases that spammers wouldn't think of as, of using, because this is ordinary conversation. So in one case, I'm scoring, 7 words, on the spam side that identify this as spam, and on the ham side, I've got 7 phrases that identify it as good email. And that's the difference in how this works. And with Redis, I can do a compare of, say, 30 phrases, to intersect that against 30 million phrases in a fraction of a second. I can do all this stuff in real time. And so using only these extremely simple commands in Redis, with, very little knowledge of how this works other than I set it up and it just works, and having, a relatively low skill level in this compared to, a lot of you out there, who are doing very sophisticated things, I have created essentially, a form of artificial intelligence that's, different than Google. Google's, they can identify dogs from cats, I'm trying to identify Elvis from Elvis impersonators. and doing it with a high level of accuracy. So, it is very specialized. I'm not saying that, what I'm doing isn't anywhere near what Google's doing, In fact, it's the simplicity of it, that's amazing, is that, this thing's so simple that I just kind of ran across it. It's like, wow, I just invented artificial intelligence, a new form of it. So then, the way this learns by association, here's an example, So, we got up here, do you want to get some lunch today? And I got lunch today in brackets. Okay, so lunch today is a phrase that's learned. Then you say, we're going to lunch today to see a movie and see a movie afterwards. Well, to see a movie. I want to see a movie about time travel. Are you interested? The phrase, are you interested, is, in getting together after work at my place. If more people were getting together to make a better world, we would have less poverty. Better education leads to less poverty. So you see that the vocabulary keeps increasing, so it has all these words and phrases, millions and millions of words and phrases that are used by ordinary people. And ordinary people in ordinary conversation, especially if it's specialized, if you're, different companies have their own vernacular talking about technical stuff. And all that technical stuff, as they exchange email, gets learned, and the false positive rate drops to levels that are so low that it's scary. I mean, I'm actually a little bit nervous in some ways, that, in the wrong hands, Big Brother's going to own us with this thing. And I think the technology could be used for a lot of different things. I think, for example, that if I had 1,000 Republicans go to Safeway, and I get the UPC codes of what's in their shopping cart, and 1,000 Democrats go to the same Safeway, and I get the UPC codes of what's in their shopping cart, then you could take some unknown person, take them into the Safeway, give me the UPC codes, I'll tell you who they're going to vote for with 99% accuracy. And I think it can be done, without knowing anything about the product, or any type of social things that, Republicans are this way and Democrats are that way. I don't have to know anything but the UPC codes, and or any groups, like that, this might be used in medical. You have flags about, okay, here's a whole bunch of raw information about this person's medical, and these are information about people who've had these certain diseases, and you run it through this classifier, and this could point you in the right direction on some of this stuff. So, and the thing that's kind of nice about this is, I hate spammers. I would probably do my job for free if I wasn't making money at it. I really feel like spam is sort of like a crime against humanity. The internet is our common neural network, and spammers are criminals on that in that network. So I really get a lot of satisfaction in the fact that I've come up with something that I think not only stops spam, but it's a technology that's strong enough to actually defeat spammers, because if this was widely implemented, it could make it to where it's not profitable to be a spammer anymore. And there's just so many aspects of what I'm looking at that I don't see how anybody could fake their way through it, especially if it were done right. And as a programmer, I'm a very innovative programmer, but I'm also a very sloppy programmer. I would rate my programming skills as, B, C+. I mean, I do all right. I get things done. I think that there's potential there to even do something far beyond what I've done with this. So I'm kind of hoping that by revealing all this that I haven't put myself out of business, but I'm trying to get a little bit of intellectual property ownership on this just to be able to license it to a few big guys so that if everybody starts doing this and nobody uses my service anymore because everybody else is doing it better than I am because I just gave away the secret sauce that I can get a little something for it so I won't starve to death. But anyhow, there's 15 more minutes. I'm going to leave some time for questions because I feel like you guys probably have a lot of things you might want to ask me. There's a microphone right over here in the center. And if anybody wants to ask me some questions, just get up and line up behind the microphone and you can, ask me about Redis or spam filtering or whatever, or, I can continue to talk about, other types of aspects of I even have, some possible Klingon spam for those of you who are into Star Trek. But try to use the microphone over here because if you can, because that way we can get on audio. Or if you want to, if you can't make it to the microphone, I'll just repeat the question. Go ahead.
I have a question. Has anyone ever calculated the amount of servers and electricity consumed by the distribution of spam?
I don't know.
Speaking of crimes against humanity, I mean.
First of all, in spite of the fact that I've been in the spam filtering business, I have no idea what percentage of spam to real email is because I'm doing tricks that attract spammers. And people who don't get spam aren't using my service. So people who come to me are people who have problems, So on my system, it's 99% spam, but yes, there's a lot of energy being used, electricity, that's causing global warming, from spam, and there's, people who have, serious crime going on. If you ever had downloaded Trojan that wipes out your drive and wants ransom to get all your data back, I know somebody who that happened to. It didn't happen through a spam. But I know the people who, that does happen, and that's a serious problem, And go ahead, we have another.
Hi, since we're talking about spam here, so I guess can you please evaluate just how your system works compares with SpamAssassin just out of box and Gmail's spam filters? Because to be honest, these days, I'm using Gmail only because of their spam filters.
I don't know. I know Gmail does a good job. I don't know what they do and how they do it. So I'm pretty sure they don't do this or that nobody else does this because if this is something that if anybody was doing it, everybody would be doing it. It's that good. SpamAssassin is great if you have nothing at all, It will get rid of a lot of your spam, but SpamAssassin is generally pretty primitive. It's way better than nothing, but it's not nearly as good as, a lot of new sophisticated techniques. They try hard, but the difference is a SpamAssassin is all rule-based, so it's all based on what you know. It's and it's also Bayesian, so it's like this is ham, it's all about matching. What I'm doing is all about not matching. And when you're not matching, you're comparing to an infinitely big database of stuff that you don't know. So that makes it in a whole different class because you're matching against an infinite set. And that's the secret sauce that makes this thing, is the concept that makes it better. And Redis is the thing that gives it the functionality to make it work at that speed. Well, the ham corpus and the spam corpus are actually multiple databases involving 9 different aspects that I look at. The sum total of all tokens is somewhere in the 50 million range, with the spam being about 30 million. Interestingly enough, the spam tokens are less than the ham, even though there's more of them. The spammers tend to say the same things, So it's Canadian pharmacy, and different ways to misspell stuff, The domain combination list is my biggest database. It is 15 gigabytes of data, and that's the ham and spam together. for just that aspect of it. Another thing I'm doing when you're mentioning SpamAssassin is I got SpamAssassin at the tail end, and then I have rules that I take the rules that come out of it, and I tokenize just the rule names. And then I throw that into this thing, and I do comparisons on that, and it basically makes rule combinations where it notices that certain combination of rules, are spam indicators, and other combination of rules are ham indicators, where I don't even have to tell it, anything about it other than the rule name. So this is like taking SpamAssassin and enhancing it and making a secondary scoring system on the rules that are coming out of SpamAssassin. Anybody else have any questions? Go ahead. Yes, his question was, am I using tokens and phrases as keys in incrementing? I'm actually storing the tokens in two different ways. I have one thing where I store the token with an increment value and an expiration, which is 8 days right now, more or less, 7,500 or 750,000 seconds. And then I use that data, and I also put it in the sets, and then I go to the data that has the tokens by themselves to use that to forget information. So I could expire stuff out of the sets, and I'm using a script I wrote in PHP to do that. I mean, my languages I use are PHP, Exim has Redis built into it, Bash scripts where I pipe it into Redis CLI, and a little bit of everything else, So, next question. Expiring within the set would help, although it's not necessary. I run the expire thing once a day, and so it would be a feature if they had that. That would be great, but I've managed to live without a lot of things in Redis that I think should be there. Okay, the question was, do I take in geographic information so that a Canadian pharmacy in Canada wouldn't mean the same thing as a Russian brides in Russia wouldn't mean the same thing, to Russians? And the answer is technically yes, because I store, the country stuff, but I don't have to code, the values to associate that. You see, if there's a .ru in with it, then the learner automatically takes care of that. So that's one of the beauties of this is I don't have to write the rules. I don't have to evaluate this stuff. All I do is provide the data, and it figures it out on its own. I don't use sorted sets at all, and there are probably better ways to do what I'm doing. Like I said, I'm a simple programmer, kind of, learn it as fast as I can and get the thing working, and then learn new stuff if I have to learn it. I'm at a point where I've learned so many languages that in order to learn something new, I have to forget something to make room for it. So some of you probably have experienced that too. It's like, oh, don't make me learn something new. I'm going to lose something and I don't know what it is. Okay, let's take a question on this side. Oh, high availability. A single server is sufficient availability for me, other than, if the thing fries, I'm using OpenVZ to virtualize all this stuff. So if I lose hardware, I can bring it up on another machine and make it look exactly the same. I have a task that goes in. The regular config file never saves anything to disk. I have a task that goes in every 2 hours, forces a save to disk, and then I rsync that over to a backup server that makes a snapshot every 2 hours. And because it's just spam data, if I lose a couple hours worth of data, it's no big deal. So I'm in a situation where reliability is not as important as long as I don't lose it all. And since it's, over several, the database is split up. If I lost one, I still have a lot of aspects of other things, and I still have all my old rules in there too. So it would still work pretty good even if a server's down. Well, okay. It was interesting giving this talk, and I enjoyed it, and I thank you for coming to listen to me. And I'll be around available for questions and thank you all.